How many of y'all have seen the movie Interstellar? Nice. Okay. So when that movie came out, when I want to say I was like a senior in college around that time. Obviously, huge movie, right? Everyone's talking about it. And I went and saw it, and the film student I was, always kind of analyzing everything, thinking about everything, thinking I know a lot about movies. I left the theater disappointed, as only a good film student could be, right? And my big, here it is. Here's my coffee. My big complaint was this feeling of like, okay, this whole like plot's going on, there's all this tension. If you haven't seen it, it's about space and there's a struggle and they're trying to figure out if they can overcome the struggle, okay? Pretty general, pretty good, right? I know. Grant doesn't even know the title of the movie. That's too much info for him. He doesn't want to be spoiled about anything. But I had this feeling as I left that like they kind of solved it too well. You know what I mean? And in like literature and in film, we would use the phrase, which I'm not even sure if we always used it correctly, Deus ex machina, this idea of like sort of God just sets things right all at once and just kind of fixes the story, or a divine being does that. And then a few years later, I watched the movie again and I could see better the hints that they were sort of the breadcrumbs that they were leaving about what they were going to do in the story later. So it wasn't quite as much as a sudden, like, fix everything kind of situation that I thought it was. And slowly, I went from disappointed, crossing my arms, kind of like film student who knows better, to being like, actually, this movie's kind of awesome. And I will not lie to you, I watch that movie probably twice a year now. So pretty big change, pretty big conversion, okay? So what I could not see at first, I did start to see later and had a very different outlook. What'd you say? There we go. Someone's on my, this story's making sense to somebody. Okay, thank you. Another example of this, whenever the first year that I knew Grant, that we were acquaintances at first, was a very interesting year. It did not at all set either of us up to know that we were going to be friends. In Focus, we have this thing where, like, if you're a small group leader, you usually have someone who's like what they call your peer team leader. All that means is, in Grant's case, he was on staff as like an intern / apprentice with Focus for a year. So he would meet with a lot of us small group leaders to kind of help us think through issues in our groups, how to disciple people well in our groups, all that kind of stuff. But I did not know him before. He came from UTD and he came up here and was meeting with me and my like co-small group leader for that year. I think we met like once a week. And pretty quickly, I thought, I don't understand this guy. I am confused by his style, by his demeanor. He would like ask us these questions about, faith and our small group and the guys in it that were just worded in such a way that I was like, man, are you wanting me to write like a paper? Are you assigning me a research paper to do? There's very deep questions, good questions, but impossible for me to answer. And every time we met up, the vibe was so strange. And I just was kind of like, I don't know. I can't figure this guy out. I can't tell if, like, does he think I'm doing a really bad job of leading my small group? I can't really tell. And it was just very interesting. And then he finished his year as an intern or apprentice, decided to stay in Denton. And I very strongly remember one of our first hangouts without that being like our relationship is you're in charge of me or whatever. And he was just silly, goofy, easy to be around. We made this like Vine. I don't know if y'all remember what Vine is, but he had just bought a new like drain snake kind of thing. Those things that like get clogged. So it was unused. We made this Vine about like him choking on a Chick-fil-A sandwich, me like using the drain snake and then pulling the entire sandwich whole out of his esophagus. And it was like a huge change. And what we kind of realized was that, the more we talked and got to know each other, that the structure of our friendship being this is his job and he's got to do these things was hard for him to wrap his head around and understand, and how to make friendships within that was hard for him, as well as it was hard for me and my co-leader to kind of understand how to do that on the receiving end. And once that sort of pretense was gone, and it wasn't his job to hang out with me, and he wasn't trying to think about kind of constantly how to do a good job or whatever, everything was normalized. And also, I got a way better sense of like just who he was. Like, oh, he's from UTD. They're just like that over there. And he's a really deep thinker. And I'm starting to kind of pick up on his language and kind of understand the way he thinks and really appreciate that perspective. And so it just was this interesting situation of like being very wrong about someone with a very limited amount of information and learning more about them. And then, in this case, this doesn't happen every time, but like having a really good friend who I've been friends with for like 10 years now. So I just would not have expected that would be our trajectory from that 1 year. Do you agree with that, by the way? Okay, cool. Sorry. Pretty much, yeah. You heard it here first. I think you probably felt better about me than I did about him. But anyway, that's just something that, so I think maybe that's a little bit more relatable to you than maybe the interstellar option. But in my case, thankfully, those are the only 2 times I've been wrong about something and changed my mind. But I want you to think about maybe the many times that you have been wrong about something or someone, and then something over time has changed your mind, okay? So just think for a minute. When you've changed your mind about something or someone. This is something that's been on my mind this week, and I really hope this is something that you have experienced and that you have not just experienced once, but many times. It is so good for us, so good for us to recognize when we need to change our mind about something, that we are wrong, didn't have enough information about something, or we change ourselves and grow as people. I actually thought of like way too many stories about this. I know I said I only was wrong twice earlier. Not true. I've actually been wrong a lot of times about many things. It just was hard to figure out what's like transferable and useful and doesn't like make me look like too bad, So the passages today that we're going to talk about from the lectionary could really each be their own sermon. This is probably like just always going to be true about a lot of these passages every week. There's so much more to explore on each one than we'll be able to do today. So I definitely encourage you to do that. But yet there's something about looking at them together and noticing connections that you get a perspective you just really couldn't quite get looking at them separately. There's something about looking at the Bible collectively when we get that opportunity that kind of brings together a new perspective we couldn't get on each passage's own. So this is a good time to remind you about the easy way to access all these passages on the link behind me. They're on our website. You click the Read All link, and it'll open all of the passages in the on Bible Gateway website strung together. So super helpful. And every single week, that page updates to have the current week's stuff at the top, so that you know what's coming up. But that's one of those things where if you're able to spend time reading these passages sometime before Sunday, I think it'd be really helpful for you. I think you'll get more out of the sermons on Sunday. So I highly encourage you to do that if you can. But if you're reading the Bible in a different way in your normal weekly routine, you've got something going on, you're in the Bible recap, you're doing a different Bible plan, that's great. We're not trying to mess that up. I think most important to us, to our pastoral team, all our leaders, is just that we be a community that's spending time reading God's word, that we spend time doing that individually and hearing from him, as well as communally, that we get to do that together as a body together. So that's most important. And so if you've got another Bible plan, you don't have a chance to read them before you come, that's totally okay. Don't feel pressure from us. Most importantly, we just want a way for you to be in Scripture. And if you don't have one, and what I really like about this is a really nice, just slow way of doing that. You got 4 passages a week, and you don't have to worry about trying to get through a lot, but you could take your time with each passage. So just that's available to you if you'd like. Okay, so we've got these passages this week. You're probably finding your way to them. I will have behind me in a little bit which passage I'm on at any given time, so that you know like where we are in the sermon, especially if you drift off a little bit, which I do as well. These passages really challenged me this week, not just because I was in fact, part of that reflecting was thinking about things like my story about my friendship with Grant. I felt both really challenged by these passages and in another way comforted. And some of that's like, I think I'm in this season of struggle right now for about the last 11 years or so. It's interesting, like that's how many years I've been out of school, I think. So that's just to give you a sense of what I'm referring to, just life. And kids and jobs and all that kind of stuff. Okay, it's interesting, just depending on the season you're in, when you're reading scripture, there's something maybe you've read a lot of times can be like, this is kind of like hurting me a little bit this time. Like, why is this challenging more this time? Or other times, I think you having been someone who's grown up in church, there's passages of scripture I've read a lot or heard a lot that I kind of think I have down. And then I'll read them and be like, wow, that was actually way more comforting than I had experienced before. It's like God kind of allowed me to hear it with some new ears. So both of those things have happened to me this week. And I hope that happens to you regularly with the Bible, with these passages as well. Just a really cool thing God does as we engage with his word. So the first passage we're going to talk about is 1 Samuel 16, 1 through 13. Again, that QR code will just stay there in case you need it. So I'm going to read it and then we'll talk about it. The Lord said to Samuel, "How long are you going to mourn for Saul, since I have rejected him as king over Israel? Fill your horn with oil and go. I'm sending you to Jesse of Bethlehem because I've selected for myself a king from his sons." Samuel asked, "How can I go? Saul will hear about it and kill me." The Lord answered, "Take a young cow with you and say, 'I've come to sacrifice to the Lord.' Then invite Jesse to the sacrifice, and I will let you know what you are to do. You are to anoint for me the one I indicate to you." Samuel did what the Lord directed and went to Bethlehem. When the elders of the town met him, they trembled and asked, "Do you come in peace?" "In peace," he replied. "I've come to sacrifice to the Lord. Consecrate yourselves and come with me to the sacrifice." Then he consecrated Jesse and his sons and invited them to the sacrifice. When they arrived, Samuel saw Eliab and said, "Certainly the Lord's anointed one is here before him." But the Lord said to Samuel, "Do not look at his appearance or his stature, because I have rejected him. Humans do not see what the Lord sees, for humans see what is visible, but the Lord sees the heart." Jesse called Abinadab and presented him to Samuel. "The Lord hasn't chosen this one either." Samuel said, Then Jesse presented Shammah, but Samuel said, "The Lord hasn't chosen this one either." After Jesse presented 7 of his sons to him, Samuel told Jesse, "The Lord has not chosen any of these." Samuel asked him, "Are these all the sons you have?" "Well, they're still the youngest," he answered, "but right now he's tending to the sheep." Samuel told Jesse, "Send for him. We won't sit down to eat until he gets here." So Jesse sent for him. He had beautiful eyes and a healthy, handsome appearance. And the Lord said, "Anoint him, for he is the one." So Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the presence of his brothers, and the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully on David from that day forward. And then Samuel set out and went to Ramah. Okay, so just as it happens, we did a 1st and 2nd Samuel series last spring. So that maybe still fresh for you. You might remember some of it, but you might not have been here, or it might be that you really are forgetting that, which is totally okay. But just as it happens, I happened to accidentally preach about this exact chapter in the Samuel series last year, in fact, February or so. And so I have a lot more thoughts on it than I'm going to be able to get into today. And that's all available on our podcast if you're curious. This is a really fascinating section in Samuel. But just remember the stakes and the tension of this moment. You're hearing some of that in the beginning of that passage. Entire people are under a king that Yahweh has now rejected, and a new king is being sought in secret, right? Kings don't like when you're looking for other kings to replace them. It seems like one of those things. I don't know. Maybe like they're an Enneagram something, and that's just kind of how they are. This is like spy treachery stuff, okay? Not to mention the direction of a whole people is hanging in the balance. Anyone who's just kind of aware of any of this stuff or hears murmurs of it, the who is our king and where they're at with Yahweh, pretty big deal for this entire people. So what's going to happen? That's what Samuel's wondering. That's what the elders of the town are wondering when he shows up. Are you here in peace? That kind of stuff. But the Lord said to Samuel, "Do not look at his appearance or his stature, because I have rejected him. Humans do not see what the Lord sees, for humans see what is visible, but the Lord sees the heart." Yahweh sees the heart. So this is a really clear contrast made, right, in this passage between the way humans see and the way that Yahweh sees. And this is worded what's interesting to me about this is the way it's worded in my reading is just that it's not like a particular truth for this story only, right? It's not like hey, Samuel, just this one time, here's how humans see, and just this one time, here's how God sees. It's worded in this broad, like we're getting some information about Yahweh, about this God, that's really important information. And for Samuel, this requires a lot of trust because it's not that God will show Samuel exactly why he's choosing David. At least that's not presented in the story to us. It's that he will tell him who he is choosing, and that the criteria, at least, is based on seeing the heart. That's all we're kind of let into on that decision. Samuel will need to depend on God to both hear what that decision is, who that person is, and then follow through on it, regardless of if it's the person, though, that Samuel's seeing all these sons, and he has his own opinions about maybe who would make a good king based on strength or height or whatever, and he's having to trust that God will tell him who it is, and that he'll just need to follow through with whatever God says. And we're not told much about David's heart here, right? We don't get a lot of details about him other than just some physical descriptions. So that's also, though that's part of Yahweh's, like the heart stuff is a big part of Yahweh's selection process, it doesn't get a huge focus here, which is interesting. The way in which Yahweh sees in a way that humans cannot see, that gets an emphasis. So we're not talking all about David here. We're talking about Yahweh's ability to see, humans' inability to see, that Yahweh selects in a way that humans do not. And that's why that's what the story, at least this little piece, seems to really be trying to emphasize here, something that we should be taking with us as we go throughout the rest of the Bible, and especially, throughout the rest of Samuel. And the way this truth of God is worded broadly does really serve to echo throughout the rest of the Samuel story. As David himself does commit acts of violence, sexual sin, these are things God is seeing. God sees the heart. Whether humans see it or not, whether good or bad, God sees the heart. So in this passage, what we're going to start seeing, if you had a chance to read some of these passages before coming on Sunday, there's some connections between them. We're getting some information, some insights, some ways of thinking about the way that God sees, But in this passage, one aspect we get of that is that he sees the heart, right? Yahweh sees inside. What we do, think, believe, whether any other human sees it or not, Yahweh sees this. That's a truth that this story is underlining. As often happens when you're a sermon's coming up and you're having to prep for it, and kind of every day you're looking for a story or an example, and it's hanging over you where you're like, man, what am I going to say about this? Yesterday, I felt like I was given a little gift because the donut shop that we go to almost every Saturday morning with our family is on the edge of our neighborhood. And the owner, his name is Mr. Kim, super nice guy, does not speak a lot of English. So a lot of our conversations go like, hey, Mr. Kim, how was your week? And he always says, so, always. So this guy's having consistent weeks, and you gotta respect that. But he's really nice to the kids. What happens a lot is I'll go ahead and select what we're gonna get. I'll pay for what we've selected. And once I've already paid, then he'll go and walk over and get 3 bags of donut holes that he gives in addition for the kids. He does this especially if they're with me. If I'm just running the errand myself, not quite as much, but the kids are standing there, he can't resist. So he just gives them even more sugar. I've gotten to see that. I've gotten to see that side of him. But one thing I've gotten to see a little bit over time, there's only 3 times this has happened. I've been in there ordering donuts or waiting for my turn, and I'll see someone come in from kind of behind me that I'm not paying attention to, and they just kind of make eye contact with Mr. Kim and then go into the bathroom, which is right there, kind of behind the counter. So it's not probably not intended to be a public restroom, but it is there. And the first time I didn't think much of it. The second time I had noticed that person, at least from the data I have, seeming like they don't have a home. They were hanging out kind of in the porch area of this strip mall with a bunch of businesses. They came in. This time I got a little more information, kind of made a gesture to Mr. Kim, and then went in the bathroom. And then yesterday I got the most information I've gotten. A different person walked in, and she walked in. She was talking with Mr. Kim, and she was getting some hand sanitizer, putting on paper towels, and just kind of cleaning herself up a little bit. And then she said, "And Mr. K, is it cool if I freshen up in your bathroom?" And he's like, and then she goes in there. And so what I've started to be able to pick up on is something that, even though I've been to this donut shop hundreds of times. Only 3 times has it been visible to me that Mr. Kim is helping people who need a bathroom to freshen up, who don't have access to one. He's just a little business owner. I'm not sure the donut shops really like rake in the dough, They make the dough, but I don't know if they rake it in. And I just was thinking about how okay, I've gotten a bit of visibility into Mr. Kim being a nice guy. But these kinds of things that I would not have seen if I was not coming here a lot, and still even have only seen 3 times, maybe I would have never gotten to see that. But these kinds of things are things that God sees all the time, right? Among whatever else, not that all hidden things are good things, but it was just this reminder that okay, God sees, as much as I haven't really been able to get somewhere with really building a friendship with Mr. Kim yet, God sees Mr. Kim's heart and this love and this compassion he has for our neighbors that are in need, and he shares what he does have with them. And I just was thinking about this is what it would be like to be God, to know all these little things. No one knows, and Mr. Kim, is not trying to wave a big banner saying, "Look how nice I am." He's being very discreet about it. But I just was there's something here that is a helpful, good reminder that this is how God sees. He sees these things and they bring him joy for people to love others the way that he wants us to. We're going to add to this idea of how God sees. We're going to go to John 9, and this is a long one, okay? It's all one story, so it's kind of easy to keep up with, but just so you know, you're settling in for a long story, all of chapter 9. As he was passing by, this is Jesus, he saw a blind man from birth. His disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" "Neither this man nor his parents sinned," Jesus answered. "This came about so that God's works might be displayed in him. We must do the works of him who sent me while it is day. Night is coming when no one can work. As long as I'm in the world, I'm in the light of the world." After he said these things, he spit on the ground, made some mud from the saliva, and spread the mud on his eyes. "Go," he told him, "wash in the pool of Siloam." So he left, washed, and came back seeing. His neighbors and those who had seen him before as a beggar said, "Isn't this the one who used to sit begging?" Some said, "Yeah, he's the one." Others were saying, "No, but he looks like him." He kept saying, "I'm the one." So they asked him, "Well, then how were your eyes opened?" He answered, "The man called Jesus made mud, spread it on my eyes, and told me, 'Go to Siloam and wash.' But when I went and washed, I received my sight." "Where is he?" they asked. "I don't know," he said. And they brought the man who used to be blind to the Pharisees. The day Jesus had made the mud and opened his eyes was the Sabbath. Then the Pharisees asked him again how he received his sight. "He put mud on my eyes," he told them. "I washed and I can see." Then the Pharisees said, "This man is not from God because he doesn't keep the Sabbath." But others were saying, "How can a sinful man perform such signs?" And there was a division among them. Again, they asked the blind man, "What do you say about him since he opened your eyes?" "He's a prophet," he said. The Jews did not believe this about him, that he was blind and received sight, until they summoned the parents of the one who had received his sight. They asked him, "Is this your son, the one you say was born blind? How then does he now see?" "We know this is our son and that he was born blind," his parents answered. "But we don't know how he now sees, and we don't know who opened his eyes. Ask him, he's of age. He'll speak for himself." His parents said these things because they were afraid of the Jews, since the Jews had already agreed that if anyone confessed him as a Messiah, he would be banned from the synagogue. This is why his parents said, "He's of age, ask him." So the second time they summoned the man who had been blind and told him, "Give glory to God. We know that this man is a sinner." He answered, "Whether or not he's a sinner, I don't know. One thing I do know. I was blind and now I can see." Then they asked him, "What did he do to you? How did he open your eyes?" "I already told you," he said, "and you didn't listen. Why do you want to hear it again? You don't want to become his disciples too, do you?" They ridiculed him. You're the man's disciple, but we're Moses' disciples. We know God has spoken to Moses, but this man, we don't know where he's from." "This is an amazing thing," the blind man told them. "You don't know where he's from, and yet he opened my eyes. We know that God doesn't listen to sinners, but if anyone is God-fearing and does his will, he listens to him. Throughout history, no one has ever heard of someone opening the eyes of a person born blind. If this man were not from God, he wouldn't be able to do anything. You were born entirely in sin, they replied, and you're trying to teach us? Then they threw him out. Jesus heard that they had thrown the man out, and when he found him, he asked, "Do you believe in the Son of Man? Who is he, sir, that I may believe in him?" He asked. Jesus answered, "You have seen him. In fact, he's the one speaking with you." "I believe, Lord," he said, and he worshiped Jesus. Jesus said, "I came into this world for judgment, in order that those who do not see will see, and those who do see will become blind." Some of the Pharisees who were with him heard these things and asked him, "We aren't blind too, are we?" "If you were blind," Jesus told them, "you wouldn't have sin. But now that you say, 'we see,' your sin remains." Okay, so super interesting story. There's all this, like, I think they would call it dramatic irony, playing out, some actually funny conversations going on, the formerly blind man being snarky and exactly the way he should, getting in a little bit of trouble just as he should. You gotta love it. So very interesting story, right? First, Jesus dismisses the read of the situation. Let's recap a couple things, okay? Initially, the read is like, well, who sinned, right? Who sinned? Was it this guy or his parents? He dismisses that from the very beginning. You're not seeing it right, disciples. It's not about who sinned. It's about God's works being displayed. And the blind man displays an impressive sort of blind trust. He goes and does what Jesus said. How interesting is that? I'm going to make some mud, put on your eyes, you go wash in this pool. He just does it. We don't see any real hesitation from him. The parents are trying to be honest, but also not get in trouble. That's an interesting situation there. They know for sure it's their son, but they're being kind of, just trying to be put into a corner there. And I think there's something so interesting about this that the blind man definitely has the benefit of he's trying to prove that this is all true, but he has all he needs to know is that he used to be blind and now he sees. It's not complicated to him, and yet everyone around him is trying to make it complicated. What's funny is that now he just has restored, vision. Everyone around him can see just fine, and yet they don't actually really think that much about the miracle of that, right? Someone who has not been seeing and now sees, the miracle is very real to them. But anyone who can see anything at all, the miracle of being a human being at all, having the ability to see anything at all, is totally lost on most of us, right? And the people who have been seeing this whole time are so blind to what is so obvious. Jesus says basically as much at the end there. They've built for themselves this logic trap with one solution that they refuse to believe. Someone who's a sinner cannot do the works of God. So clearly he didn't do this, and clearly this guy is tricking us in some way or whatever. And all of that because they've already decided what's true. You see what's happening there? They've already decided what makes sense to them, and that's what's true. They're working on this assumption. They're assuming they've been seeing rightly this whole time. They've judged and decided already who Jesus is and who he's not, and so nothing makes sense. And yet they don't understand that it is their assumption, the ways they've been seeing wrongly that need to change. Jesus ends this whole section with some great just inversion stuff, right? It's those who do not see will see, and those who do see will become blind. And they're just proving that point here. So this aspect of God, we're getting a lot here in the story, which is great, of how God sees. At the beginning, talking about it's not about who sinned. It's about opportunity. It's about God's works being displayed. This way of God seeing is about seeing a bigger plan, seeing opportunity, seeing a place for redemption to happen, to see where he is working, to see what's best and what's true. The Pharisees don't see that. How cool. I mean, it's so sad that they're not getting to rejoice in this amazing thing that the God that they say they serve and love is right in front of them doing, right? It's really, there's a tragedy there. These truths are available to them and they don't see them. So this is an aspect of how God sees. He sees the plan he's working on. He sees opportunities to redeem. He wants to show where he's working. He sees what's best, what's good, what's true. And that's what's trying to be told here in this story. In a similar vein in this Ephesians passage, we get this like really cool, interesting pastoral word as not just a story, but then a way for the early church to kind of walk in these kinds of truths. So let's read that really quickly. This one's short. So you were once darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. You were once darkness, but you are now light in the Lord. Walk as children of light, for the fruit of light consists of all goodness, righteousness, and truth. Testing what is pleasing to the Lord, don't participate in the fruitless works of darkness, but instead expose them. For it is shameful even to mention what is done by them in secret. Everything exposed by the light is made visible. For what makes everything visible is light. Therefore it is said, get up, sleeper, and rise up from the dead, and Christ will shine on you. Okay, a new element, a new sort of metaphors being added into this, right? The light and the dark. It's so connected because one cannot see without light. Even as able as anyone's eyes may be, they cannot see if there is not light. So when this is being written, it's really paralleling to this, Jesus talking about light and dark, day and night, even in the story we just read. But it's this word to the churches with this subject in mind. It moves us toward a way of thinking outwardly. What does it look like to be people who live relying on God's sight? God who sees the heart, God who sees the plan, God who sees the opportunities to redeem, God who sees and knows what's true. Knowing that other humans God loves don't know him yet and live in a darkness that really does blind them. So in writing about this, Paul's trying to move us toward like, okay, now that we know this about God and the way that he works, the way that he brings light, we are people of light that are able to be part of this work, shining light for those who are in the darkness. He's kind of moving the church in a way of thinking outwardly about this. It's really important because it's God in us, with us. Because of God in us and with us, we shed light. But it's not because of something we've done, okay? We don't get this credit of now that you're righteous, you see all things right, you know? It's because of God that we are people of light. We're invited into being part of this, not by our own abilities. Nothing about our own wisdom is part of this. But only by light can anything be seen. Only by light can something be visible. So there's this building kind of theme here that we get to see. Not only that God sees more rightly, but he also allows us to see what's good and right and true. Even as hard as we try to judge and discern, we cannot see what God does not show us. We cannot see what God does not allow us to see. We cannot see what he sees. We cannot see the heart, the plan, we can't see all that. All we can see is what God will show us and let us in on. So I kind of want to recap. I know these are confusing, very different parts of Scripture to kind of throw together at you. There's a bit of an arc here, I think, that we can follow. So we recognize first that we do not know. Think back to Samuel. He's told, humans don't see how God sees. God sees the heart. So what was required from Samuel in that moment is to recognize, okay, so I don't know. So I shouldn't be trying to understand and decide. I should just be following. I think it's the first step for any of us, right? Recognize we don't know. We can't see. We don't understand. This is very humbling and scary, and it requires surrender, but it is deeply necessary because as we enter into relationship with God and try to be people who retain our own self, worth in terms of thinking we are wise or good at discerning or all that kind of stuff, it requires this kind of surrender because otherwise we are so at risk of being exactly like the Pharisees, right? We think we know, and so we are so unable to see what we don't know. It's necessary to enter into and remind ourselves often of this truth. We can't see. We don't understand without God. We don't know. We have to humble ourselves and surrender to him. Like, God, only you see things rightly, and we only get to see what you show us. And then I think from there, we can take great comfort. It doesn't have to stay this scary thing. It can be this comforting thing that God does see all. God does know all. God is working on something. Someone is blind and it's so that works can be done in them. That's great. That's something God sees that we don't see. We can take comfort that he is doing these kinds of things, that he's working in these ways. And through that process, we are given sight by God. We're allowed to see what he's doing in small bits, right? We're allowed to see the kind of God he is and the ways that he's working. And we get to be people of life that don't just see that for ourselves. You can see the ways that God has changed you. You can see the way that God has changed those around you. This is all evidence of, what he's doing. But it's not just enough just to see that and be like, that's awesome. That's great. The Ephesians passage really brings that to home with saying, we're people of light now. There's a responsibility we have to be part of showing who God is and shining his light on all that's around us. And so the thing that, as I thought about this and was trying to assemble thoughts and not go too much on any one thing and cut stuff and try to make it less confusing. And, I only did, I could tell that I still made it confusing. So you're welcome. The phrase that kept coming to my mind was just the phrase, only God truly sees. Okay. So we have that somewhere in there, I think. Only God truly sees. You can just kind of write that down, underline that, something like that. Only God truly sees. And like I just talked about in this arc, there's these times where that is such a scary, daunting, humbling thing to admit, and you don't really want to. You don't always want to be humbled. You don't always want to admit that you don't know a thing. At the same time, I think depending on where you are this morning, that can be such good news, such comforting news. And I think the comfort part really comes with, we're going to close with Psalm 23. I saved it for the end because I think this just gets to be this amazing poetic expression of this concept in a way, while we're on this topic. This can be, talked about and meditated on in so many ways, but I want us to do it in this way today. So I'm going to read this, and then I'm going to talk a bit about it, and then we're actually going to kind of still be in that zone of talking about and thinking about Psalm 23 during communion in a moment. Okay. The Lord is my shepherd. I have what I need. He lets me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He renews my life. He leads me along the right paths for his name's sake. Even when I go through the darkest valleys, I fear no danger, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Only goodness and faithful love will pursue me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord as long as I live. Man, it's good stuff. Bars, as they say. And this is just this expression of what's it like, to be a creature that's helpless to lead itself, right? Needing to be led. Yeah, this one, to tie it back to the Samuel story, this one's ascribed to David. And so if he did write this, what do the words reveal about his heart? Maybe a little glimpse into what kinds of things God was seeing when he was trying to choose a king unlike Saul. Someone who has a deep love and dependence on God. Not just like an appreciation from afar. That's a good God over there. But this deep love and dependence on Yahweh would be required to write something like this. If I, put yourself in David's shoes for a moment. If I'm a shepherd looking at these sheep as their guide and they desperately need one, and instead of thinking, yeah, I know all the good places to go. I know how to protect creatures and I have it all figured out. But instead to arrive at the thought of, no, I'm just like these sheep. How fortunate am I that I have a good shepherd who gives me what I need? And I myself am like often caught in this illusion of independence and self-sufficiency. I'm an adult. I'm keeping myself alive pretty good so far. I have kids now, keeping them fed and growing pretty good. And yet I can tell you that when I read these words like Psalm 23, I just feel them deep in my bones. Just like, man, I'm just a sheep. I don't know what's good or bad or best. I don't know where to go or what to do. I can't see over a hill to save my life. I'm desperate for a good shepherd. So I want us to be in that space as we go get your communion elements. Of course, you can, talk as usual and greet each other warmly and all of that. But keep this in mind because as we come back, I'm going to pray over us. We're going to take our communion together, and then we're actually going to have a song that keeps us in this mode and gives you a chance to meditate on Psalm 23. So go ahead and get your communion elements now. Okay, let's pray. God, you are our good shepherd. Help us to believe it. Take us gently, lead us firmly. Gift us with the sweet sound of your voice on our ears. Bless us with the sight of your staff. Help us to be good sheep who trust you, who don't foolishly think that we're not sheep or have no need to be led, or even worse, that there's no good shepherd at all. Thank you for your guidance, your sacrifice, for always being with us, and for the promise of being with you forever. Amen.
Thanks for joining us for our sermon podcast. We would love for you to join us on Sunday morning or in one of our small groups during the week. And you can get more information about that at dentonnorthchurch.com.